I'm Craig Cyphers with Cyphers Family Real Estate, and today we're breaking down 5 key Western Montana markets using real numbers, days on market, sale price, inventory, and listings, so you know exactly where things stand. So now, if you're thinking about making a move to Montana or even moving around in the state of Montana, you're going to want to pay attention to this. And frankly, even if you're sitting in California, Washington, Texas, New York, the principles we're talking about here today will apply in any market because real estate leaves clues. All right, not all Montana markets are moving in the same direction, so you've got areas where homes are moving fast, other areas where they're starting to take a breath, and inventory's building in some places and it's tightening up in others. And depending on where you are, that can signal strength, or it can be the early stages of a shift. And I'll tell you, markets just don't fall apart overnight. They do leave fingerprints. So days on market stretches out, inventory starts to stack up, price reductions show up quietly before anybody's really talking about it in the news. So today we're going to talk about the market metrics in Kalispell, Missoula, Great Falls, Helena, and Hamilton, and show you exactly what the data is telling us in each one. Now, here's the key. Just because one market may be cooling a bit doesn't mean Montana real estate's in trouble. And just because another looks strong doesn't mean that you can ignore what's underneath. So, because at the end of the day, every one of these markets still offers what people really are coming to Montana for, and that's lifestyle. Space, scenery, community, a better pace of life. And when that lines up with solid fundamentals, that's where you get not just a great place to live, but a long-term investment you can feel good about. And we can all debate about whether homes are investments or not, but let's face it, if you sell, you'll want to be able to put a little money in your pockets. So let's get into the numbers and see what's happening across the state of Montana. All right, let's start up in Kalispell. Now, if you've been paying attention over the last few years, Kalispell has probably been one of the hottest markets in Montana, no question. A lot of in-migration, a lot of demand for a while, and things were moving fast. Prior to 2008, Kalispell was cooking with gas, and I think Flathead County was the fastest growing in the state, and that's just before people found Bozeman. But here's what we want to know now. Is the Kalispell market still on fire? Are we starting to see some changes underneath the surface? Because this is exactly the kind of market where shifts tend to show up early. When a market runs hot like Kalispell did, you don't need a crash to change the dynamics. All it takes is a little more inventory, a few more days on market, and suddenly the leverage starts to move. So let's look at the numbers. We're going to walk through days on market, average and median sale price, months of inventory, and total listings. And we'll see what we're really looking at in the Kalispell market. And as we go through it, ask yourself one question. If I were buying or selling in this market today, who really has the leverage? So here we're looking at Kalispell's single-family residential market, and this is the cumulative days on market. And you can see in the first quarter of 2026, the number of days is between 133 and 160. And if we look across the 5 years, we don't have a whole lot of variation except for in January of 2023. And in fact, the current days on market are less than they were in the super hot market of 2021. So now staying with the Kalispell single-family residence market, and we take a look at the close price on average, and we take a look at our first quarter of 2026, we'll see that it's down a little bit from 2025. And our average that we're seeing is 695,672 in the first quarter of 2026. In the first quarter of 2025, our average ends up being 729,615. Now, if we go back all the way to the Q1 of 2021, we'll find our average ends up being 485,575. Now, in the first quarter of 2026, we'll find that we've got a 43% increase over 2021 and a 5% decrease over the same period in 2025. And it's evident that we've got a lot of variation by month across the 5-year period. But if we take into consideration the very highest 1 month in 2025 and the difference between that and the lowest month in 2021, we have a 56% increase over the first quarter low and high. But we can see that we've got a general trend, but only 5% down. Staying with our single family stats, and we take a look at our median closed price. That's half above and half below. In our first quarter, we'll find that our average is $574,000 compared to $601,917 in 2025, for roughly a 5% decline. In the first quarter of 2021, we show that our average was $409,333. Compare that with 2026, it's a 40% increase over the 2021 figure. But if we look over the last 4 years, we'll see that it's a surprisingly stable market and relatively consistent. Talking about inventory with respect to real estate, we are talking about months of inventory or supply that's in the marketplace. And we define a buyer's market as having 6+ months of inventory. A balanced market is where you've got about a 5 to 6 month inventory, and a seller's market is between 0 and 4 months of inventory. So these are important to understand when we're talking about these stats. So we're establishing here that we are in Kalispell Market, and we're going to look at our months of inventory. And we can see in our first quarter, we're getting mixed signals down here. March was showing a balanced market trending towards a seller's market, where in the first 2 months, we're in definitely a buyer's market. That's typical for this time of year. And the first quarter of 2025 was a buyer's market. And we can contrast that with Q1 of 2021 over here, which was clearly a seller's market. Continuing with the Kalispell single-family residential market, we'll examine the total number of listings on the residential side for single-family homes, and we'll see that the number of listings is up in March and also in February, down in the month of January, but a clear difference from our first quarter in 2021. And we'll see that as the absorption rate slows, inventory will rise here, and that will potentially push pricing down. We'll see how it goes. All right, now let's drop down to Missoula. So Missoula is a little different animal. You know, you've got the University of Montana right there. So there's a built-in energy. It's a steady flow of people, and frankly, a level of economic stability that you don't always see in smaller markets. But there's a little more than that there. Missoula's got a cultural heartbeat to it. You've got your arts, your music, your restaurants. You got the river running through town. It's one of those places where people don't just move for a house, they generally move for a way of life, and that matters because markets that have that kind of draw tend to have a little bit behavior over time. Now, let's layer on top of that you've got some of the best healthcare around. Some of it's world class. That is very important to a lot of buyers, especially folks coming in from, say, out of state, or people transitioning from more rural communities around the state of Montana into areas where, as they get older, they can access healthcare. So that's a big piece of that decision. So when you look at Missoula, you're not just looking at the numbers, from like a spreadsheet kind of sort of thing. You've got lifestyle, you've got access to healthcare, you've got, like the restaurants, things to do, the sports at the university. So you're looking at a market that's driven by those types of things. And now the real question is what are the numbers actually saying right now? Is Missoula holding steady? Is it still competitive? Is it pricing itself out? Or are we seeing a break in the action? Are we starting to see some of those shifts that we talked about earlier? So let's break it down. Again, we're looking at residential, the single family. That's our best gauge of the market. And this, of course, is our days on market. And we can see from our first quarter that things are stretching out there a little bit in comparison to our first quarter in 2025. Right now, we're sitting at a current month in March at about 119 days on the market. So when we get into the Missoula, of course, we're single family residential again, and we're going to find some surprises here in our average sale prices. We first of all have in our first quarter of 2026, we've got a little bit of an outlier here at the top. In January, something a little over 800,000. Our average sale price is $722,055. And then for 2025, our average price is $642.43. And then this outlier, how does that happen? Well, we have a large sale up here. It is about $6.5 million. And that sale took place on January 2nd, first part of the year in 2026. And it was 600 acres. So it was a large parcel, but it just had a small home that you can see here. So it did fall within the residential statistics. Now, if we take a look at our first quarter of 2021, we'll see that the average sale then was $529,227, and that represents a 36% increase in 2026 over Q1 in 21. For our median home price in the Missoula single-family residential market, we have in the first quarter of 2026 an average of $569 median sale price. And in 2025, we had a $568, so it's up just a smidge. But if you take a look at all the numbers, even maybe going back to that first quarter in 2021, we haven't had an awful lot of movement, certainly not in the last four quarters, the first quarters. It's $443,945 for an average in 2021, and that represents an increase of 28% over Q1 of 2021. So it's relatively stable out there, folks, in the Missoula market for pricing. On the inventory side of the Missoula single-family residential market, we're seeing in our first quarter up here in 2026 that we've got a little bit of a mix, because if we take a look at our months of inventory, that first month in the quarter, January, we were strongly into a buyer's market. And now in March, it's showing the seller's market and very well balanced back in 2025 in the first quarter. First quarter of 2021, clearly a seller's market for those people out looking for property. So it's relatively stable. We can expect that it's going to be a buyer's market typically in the early part of the year, but this year in Missoula, it's kind of leveled out. Okay, let's take a look at the number of listings in the Missoula market, and we're going to take a look at this active listings during the first quarter of 2026. We're going to see that we're at about 290 some right now, getting close to 300. That's a 30% increase in listings over the same period in 2025. If we go back, we do have a pretty large amount of listings in 2021, but we'll see here that we're getting to be increased on our listings both January, February, and March. And now here's an interesting thing, and I'm going to show it to you. If you take a look at this, you're going to see that you're getting bigger numbers as we go down. Every year, we can see this phenomenon, but this is from 21 through 24. And then all of a sudden, the inventory really shoots up in the summer of 25. Now, that's going to have an impact on pricing, I'm sure. But here's another thing to think of. Every August, September, you're going to see the highest inventory, the highest number of listings out there. And so that's going to be the area where you're going to be able to get your best deals. And this would tell me that we're going to see some price adjustments coming in the Missoula market. Let's take a look at all Great Falls. Great Falls has quietly been one of the more affordable markets in Montana. And that's gotten a lot of attention, especially from buyers who have been priced out of other areas in the state. That we've talked about those other areas that are a little more expensive. Now, don't mistake affordable for lacking in opportunity, however, because what Great Falls offers is something a lot of people are actively looking for right now, and that's value. You can still get into a home here at a price point that makes sense without giving up a lot of what makes really Montana, Montana. You know, you've got great hunting, and all of it's right here in your backyard. You've got the Missouri River running through here, some of the best fishing in the state, bar none. And for a lot of people, that alone is a reason enough to take a hard look at this market. So if you've got this combination of accessibility, lifestyle, and room to grow, tighten up fast. And you also have Maelstrom Air Force Base here. You know, geez, our nukes are in the area. Work with me. Okay, so, well, maybe that's not a great deal, but believe me, I don't think anybody's going to be dropping anything on us anytime soon. So let's dig into the numbers, days on market, pricing, inventory, and listings, and see what Great Falls is really telling us right now. If we take a look at the days on market for Great Falls single family residential properties, we see that they're relatively quick sales relative to some of the other markets in the state for average days on market. For our first quarter of 2026, we have double digit is all, one triple digit month in February. The days on market are going up, however, so they're stretching out just a little bit in the Great Falls market. So when we look at our Great Falls single-family residence stats for the average sale price, we'll find that in the first quarter of 2026, the average close price was $386,386, and for 2025, that average was $364,945 for an increase there of about 6%. And on our first quarter of 2021, it was $264,273 for an average sale price. Our overall increase was 46% from 2021 to 2026. Looking at the Great Falls residential, single-family residential market, again, when we take a look at the closed price median for our first quarter of 2026, we find that the average of those was 350,000. Now, with the 2025, that figure was 320,333. So we've gone up about 9%. Now, when we get back to the 2021 first quarter, our average was 222,583. And that, when we take a look at where we're at in 2026, we're 57% higher than 2021. Always confirming that we are working with a single-family residential Great Falls market. We are looking at our inventory, the months of inventory, and we can see from our first quarter of 2026 that we look down and we're sitting on a seller's market. And if we look back at 2025, the first quarter, some slight differences, but we're in a seller's market. And if we look back at 2021, which of course we all know was a seller's market, and if we now look at the overall, we can see that Great Falls has just been consistently a seller's market. So we want to check and make sure we're doing Great Falls residential single family. And here's what we find is that for the number of listings in the first quarter of 2026, we've had a massive growth in the number of listings that are out there. So our inventory is up there. The absorption rate must be pretty high because it's still a seller's market, but we've gone up 65% in listings. And interestingly enough, even though we've had a 6% increase in the average sale price and 9% in the median, we're still seeing a rise in inventory. Let's take a look at Helena, Montana's capital city, and a market that continues to show steady, reliable performance. Helena has always had a unique foundation thanks to its mix of government employment, healthcare, education, and the financial sector, which tends to anchor the market even when other areas fluctuate. What also makes Helena stand out is lifestyle. You're just a few minutes from the gates of the mountains, one of the most iconic stretches of the Missouri River, and a short drive over to Canyon Ferry Lake near Townsend. That combination, stable employment plus immediate access to world-class outdoor recreation, continues to attract both full-time residents and buyers looking for that Montana lifestyle without the volatility we sometimes see in resort-driven markets. From a metric standpoint, Helena is showing signs of normalization. Inventory has been gradually increasing, giving buyers a bit more breathing room. Days on market are extending slightly compared to the ultra-fast pace of the past few years. I don't know. And pricing has leveled off into a more suitable and sustainable range. But overall, the market remains balanced and healthy, not overheated, not declining, just steady. So let's take a look at the metrics there for the Helena market and see what we think. So here we are in our Helena market for single family residents, looking at our average days on market, and we can see that it is stretching out there a little bit in our first quarter of 2026 versus what we saw in 2025 all the way through the first quarter. For our Helena single family residents, we find that our average close price in the first quarter of 2026 averaged right at $518,591. For the same period in 2025, it was $568,946. So we have a decline there. In fact, it's a 9% decline in average sale price. And if we look at 2024, our average close price was $394,242. And it was 32% higher average sale price in Q1 of 2026. Now for our single family Helena, close price median, our average for 2026 in that first quarter was 486,612, and for the same period in 2025 it was 524,633, for an actual decline of right at 7%. Then in 2021, looking back, the average then was $364,059. Next, we look at the months of inventory for Helena's single-family residences, and we can see it starts out the year definitely a buyer's market, but turns broadly into a seller's market in February and March. And in 2025, we had kind of a balanced market with the 5 and 6 months of inventory. If we look back into 2021, it was in fact a seller's market. And finally, for Helena, it's the number of listings that are available. And what we see in 2026 is that we've actually got a little bit of a reduction in March against the prior year, and it was a little bit up in January. So it's kind of a mixed bag, very similar to what it was in 2025. But if we go over to 2021, we can see that if we compare that against what we see across the board here, they're very similar in terms of the number of listings. So that shows us real stability in the marketplace. All right, let's go over to Hamilton, and I'll tell you, this one's a little more personal for me. Hamilton sits right in the heart of the Bitterroot Valley, and if you spent any time here, you already know this is one of the most desirable lifestyle markets in Montana, or the West for that matter, period. You've got the Bitterroot Mountains on one side, the Sapphire Range on the other. You've got world-class fishing, hiking, hunting. It's all right here. But here's what's really interesting about the market. You've got people with significant means, people who own second, third, even fourth homes, choosing to be right here in the valley. You've got some billionaires who are hanging out here, and that tells you something, because those buyers can go anywhere. But at the same time, and this is the part a lot of people miss, Hamilton is still accessible. It isn't a market reserved for the ultra wealthy. There are opportunities here for everyday buyers who want what Montana lifestyle has without stepping into some of the most heavily priced properties or high-profile resort areas, like, say, for example, a Yellowstone or a Big Sky, for example. We have Stock Farm Club, but in general, you've got some stability here in an affordable sense. You not only have blue ribbon trout stream running the length of the valley, you are quick drive to steelhead fishing in Idaho. You have quick access to a variety of other fishing haunts like the Clark Fork on Missoula, the Beaver Head, the Big Hole to the south, and of course the hunting is excellent as well. So think about it. You've also got 1.3 million acres of wilderness out your back door to the west. So you've got this unique mix, high-end demand at the top and real opportunity across the broader market. So now the question is what are the numbers doing underneath all of that? Is the demand still holding strong? Is inventory keeping up? Are prices stabilizing or starting to move? Because when we see the kind of buyer mix in the market, the data can tell you a lot about where things are headed next. So let's break down Hamilton, days on market, prices, inventory, and listings, and see what's really going on here in the Bitterroot Valley. So looking at the Hamilton single-family market for days on market, here's our average, and we can see in the first quarter of 2026 that it is in fact stretching out there a little bit against the 2025 numbers. You can see 92 going up to 139. Now we've got an outlier here. Have no idea why this would be so high, but you can see generally in January and March, it's increased days on market. We could expect that. Okay, let's take a look at the Hamilton single-family market for average close price for the first quarter of 2026 ends up being $541,499 for an average, and in 2025 it was $514,831. But if we go back to 2021, we see that the average then was $603,940. Well, how's that possible? Well, we've got an outlier here. It's $734,321 on an average close price in March and Q1. So, looking at the market for the close price based on the median prices, first quarter 2026, the average median price was $535,750, and for 2025, that same number was $462,792. You'll notice that there's such a low price here, it's even lower than January of 2021. So that's how these statistics work. Our average here is $387,317 for a total of 38% greater than the first quarter of 2021. Now, looking at the Hamilton market for single family on months on inventory, our first quarter 2026, we can see in January that it was a relatively balanced market, but definitely in February and March, it was a buyer's market. And it was a buyer's market in 2025. We know from our stats in the first quarter of 2021 that was definitely a seller's market, and it was a seller's market in 2022 as well. 2023 was kind of the turn of the market. So looking at our single family residences in Hamilton, the number of listings in first quarter of 2026 versus 2025, we see that we have more listings, greater number of properties for sale, and that's pretty evident. And we compare that against the first quarter of 2021, and we can see that we've got a fair bit more. Now, something that I want to share with you is that when you look at these numbers, August, September, August, this is the time you want to buy a property, and this trend will be evident in every market that we talked about it. You'll have the troughs. They will peak between the middle of August and the middle of September. That is the time to buy. Now, looking across markets we've covered, the big takeaway in this is the Montana real estate market is generally stable. Yes, we're seeing some shifts. Inventory is growing in several areas. Days on market, they're getting a little bit longer. Pricing in some segments is softening or leveling. But this is not the kind of correction or turndown that many national analysts have been predicting or talking about. Montana remains fundamentally strong market driven by lifestyle demand, limited long-term supply, and steady in-migration to desirable communities. Well, if you're contemplating moving to Montana, please reach out to the Cyphers Family Real Estate. We want to be a resource for you.